to your loved ones' memories, people. Believe they're with you. So don't stop believing. Hold on to your loved ones' memories, people. Their lives are with you.
I know it was a challenge to come out this evening, but I'm so glad that you're here. I think you will enjoy the program that the committee has put together to make sure that we remember our loved ones that we lost, because everyone has lost someone through this pandemic. And we know how important that the healing is, that we can start, hopefully this event will start the healing in our community so that we can move on and prepare for the next generation. At this time, I would like to announce some of our guests that we have this evening. I'd like to welcome Representative Marla Brown, our new representative, State Representative Marla. Thank you for coming. We also have Commissioner Loretta Spielvogel, who also served on this committee. So thank you so much, Loretta, for your help and direction and inviting me to have a seat at the table. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. And we also have Commissioner Brian Burek that's with us this evening. Thank you so much for coming. I did want to give some opening remarks about the faces of COVID and how we came up with the name and just moving forward. The Lawrence County community was devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The loss was one that overshadowed the number of veteran deaths in our community. Our businesses, agencies, churches had to make some challenging decisions just to survive and take care of our families. Many of our nonprofit agencies were still recovering from this epic event. United Way was asked to join the Lawrence County COVID-19 committee about a year ago. And we were working on making sure everyone had the COVID test kits and organizing test sites for our underserved populations. This committee provided us with reports on the death rates in rural communities. And we noticed that almost twice as many people were dying in rural communities versus our urban areas. United Way formed a committee to design a program that would recognize and honor our residents that have passed on. This program had a twofold mission. One, recognizing individuals that went over and above to help others during the pandemic. And you'll see those names listed as our heroes in your program. The second was to honor and recognize our friends that we lost during this time. We know that restrictions were in place and we could not have the public viewing or times of gathering to help families heal and encourage and offer our support. This evening is set aside to honor those individuals, and we are so glad that the family members are here to join in this event. Thank you all so much. The program from this evening can be downloaded so that you can share this event with other family members once it's edited. It will be on the United Way website. And the committee started to realize that we ultimately lost a lot of people from the complications of COVID in our area. So this is what we're recognizing this evening, and that's why you're all here. But at this time, we would like to, it was interesting when we started discussing how COVID affected our residents in Lawrence County, Andrew Henley, who serves as the executive director of the Newcastle Library and is also on the board for the Historical Society, said that he started researching some information about the previous pandemic. So before we get started, we're going to start out with Andrew, and he's going to go over some of the history of Lawrence County and the pandemic. Andrew?
Thank you. I was also told to be brief, so I will try to be as brief as I can with the history here. And it's wonderful to start off with a history of kind of understanding where we were 100 years ago. As we delve into the annals of history, certain events stand out, not only because of the global impact, but also the way that we touch the hearts of our communities. One such event was the 1918-1919 influenza pandemic. Today, I'd like to walk you through the experience that many Lawrence County residents actually had during that time. In 1918, Lawrence County was a bustling region of 82,422 souls. The county, like many parts of the world, was unprepared for the viral storm that was about to hit. The influenza pandemic did not just sweep through the cities and nations, it infiltrated our homes, our streets, and our lives right here in Lawrence County. The first wave, mild yet noticeable, began in the spring of 1918. However, it was the second wave from September to December of that same year that wreaked havoc. The third wave of the spring of 1919 and a unique fourth wave in 1920 further compounded the county's struggles. But let's understand the real impact in these numbers. Out of the 82,422 residents, the pandemic afflicted thousands. While we diligently recorded 1,723 deaths directly attributed to either influenza or pneumonia, or a combination of both, since pneumonia was a symptom of influenza, many more were left dealing with the physical and emotional aftermath. Doing some simple calculations, these deaths represented a staggering 2.1% of the Lawrence County's entire population. That would be about 4 people in this room tonight. That is not just a statistic, it represents fathers, mothers, siblings, and friends. Each number was a life, a story, a dream that was snuffed out prematurely. Newcastle, the largest city in the county, housed over half of this county's population, and it bore witness to a disproportionately high number of these cases. The peaks of mortality in Lawrence County were marked with the most significant being the week of November 2nd, 1918. There were unique spreads of mortality between males and females alike. The pandemic, indifferent of gender and age, showed its might, but affecting everyone from young to old, but noticeably impacted between the ages of 25 and 44. As we reflect on this, we must remember that Lawrence County was not an outlier at all. The entire world was grappling with the pandemic. However, our community's resilience, unity, and collective strength during that tragic time exemplified the human spirit's indomitable nature. In closing, I'd like to share with you a quote, actually from Westminster's Argo in 1919. While the quote may not directly relate to the influenza pandemic, it's a sentiment that captures the essence and endurance and hope during the challenging times. And to also put it into perspective, this was also right after World War I. The year of our entering found the world hung low with battle smoke. And now we must come to the fulfillment of our years of study here. The world is yet hung with the same somber pall. Of the years that have gone by, we must say that the joys have not been unmixed with sorrow, nor our victories unmingled with defeats. But standing now at the threshold of the world, beyond and looking back, we cannot but say that it has been worthwhile. Whatever the future holds, be it carnage, war, or death, be it joy, development, and life, we only know that we shall still be going on. So let us remember this for all of us, that even in the darkest times, Lawrence County stood strong and resilient. We remember, we reflect, and we ensure that the memories of those we lost are never forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for that information. And it seems like after a tragedy or loss, we do grow closer together. So this is the beauty of everyone coming in one place. At this time, I would like to introduce Pastor Reverend Lori Burek from First Presbyterian Church in Newcastle. And I'm so glad that she's here. She's like a breath of fresh air in our community. I told her not too long ago, I said, I was in a meeting with her, and I told her, I really appreciate you accepting your calling to come to Newcastle because we needed you. So I'm so gracious that she's here and she's with us this evening. So we would ask Pastor Burek to come and offer the invocation, and then we will be in the hands of the staff of Medors.
Good evening, my brothers and sisters, and thank you, Miss Gail, for that introduction. I appreciate that Gail always sets a place at the table and invites, and I thank you for that, and I thank the United Way as well for extending the invitation to begin this time of remembering and mourning with prayer and thanksgiving for the great gifts set before us this evening. In its simplest form, an invocation invites the love and the peace of God into our time together. And so I would invite everyone here this evening to take a moment to settle yourself within the quiet of your mind and your heart. Take a breath and allow the image of perfect love to take hold in your imagination, as I offer a prayer for the community from the center of action and contemplation. God, you are the Lord of all creation, the lover of all life and of everything. Please help us to love in our very small way what you love infinitely and everywhere. We thank you that we can offer this one prayer, and that will be more than enough. Because in reality, everything and everyone is connected, and nothing stands alone. To pray for one part is to pray for the whole, and so we do. Help us each day to stand for love, for healing, for the good, for the diversity of your creation. We stand in your great heart, in your great truth, in your great love, precisely because we stand in your presence. Giving thanks that this world exists, that people exist, because of your great love. We offer our prayers to you now with all the holy names of God, through, with, and in the holy name of eternal love. Amen and amen.
First of all, to the committee, I want to thank you so much for organizing this event. I think it's so important that we recognize our loved ones and the passing of our loved ones. And I think this is just absolutely wonderful. So thank you for doing this. And so when I was asked to speak, they said, you know, speak from your perspective and what happened in the healthcare world. So in the interest of not keeping you here for 4 hours, I'll start with a story. At the time, so I'm president of UPMC Jamison and Horizon here in Lawrence and in Mercer County. And at the time I was a cardiologist. I've been a practicing cardiologist taking care of sick people for 20 years. And I actually will never forget, it was in March of 2020, and I was in my office at the time, and we started to get phone calls about shutting down the offices. And at UPMC Jameson, the outpatient office is in the hospital. And I had spent probably the last 6 years trying to make that office work. And I remember getting this phone call that we were shutting all the outpatient offices. And to be honest, I went in my room, I shut the door, and I started almost to panic. I was nervous and I was afraid like everybody else. And at one point I sat down and I had to collect myself, because in 20 years of medicine, I had never had a phone call that said, shut all the offices down and remove everybody from the hospital that doesn't need to be there. I mean, we take care of sick people. What's going to happen to everybody? Well, I'll tell you this. What I learned is that there was a new enemy, and this was a virus that we hadn't seen before. And as those of you know, by the time you're an adult, most of us have seen almost every virus, and so we might get sick, but it's only temporary. The symptoms are usually not severe. COVID wasn't like that, and it was very indiscriminate in who it affected. And so what we learned is that there was no why. There's no good reason why one person got the same virus as somebody else, and why some people passed, why it wreaked havoc on some people's immune systems, while other people didn't, had very relatively mild symptoms. I still, 3 years later, can't point to a why. But what I do know, and again, with a career spent taking care of sick people, is there won't ever be a why, because there aren't good reasons for things like this. But what I found in healthcare, when you choose a life in healthcare, you know you're going to have to deal with difficult things. We all know that people pass, and we've all lost people that we love, and we know we're going to have to deal with that. But what was new is the completely the unpredictable nature of our new enemy. Never before in healthcare had we dealt with something, and again, something that lasted really over 2+ years, where we couldn't predict who was going to get sick. 10 people might come in the ER, 8 of them left, and I couldn't tell you ahead of time who those 2 were. But I can tell you who's probably going to have a heart attack or who's probably at risk for having cancer. We knew those things. But the complete unpredictability of what was in front of us caused a lot of fear in healthcare, just like in the general population. And you can understand why people who went into healthcare, they wanted to be a nurse, they wanted to be a doctor, they wanted to be a technician, and yet they every day had to walk into a place of fear. And we can understand why we lost so many healthcare workers, because that degree of mental stress on anybody over a long amount of time, we could understand why people would want to run away from that rather than towards it. And so there were many difficult lessons I learned from COVID in terms of dealing with fear and panic and the unknown. But what I can say to all of you, and one of the things that I continue to live every day, is that through all of this, my inspiration is from all of you, from your family members. What I learned is that there are so many good people with good intentions. It was so hard, I'm sure, on all of you when loved ones were in the hospital or they were sick and you couldn't be with them as you wanted to. But I can assure you, somebody was. I saw people at the height of this, when people were still afraid to be around me or my children. I would see a secretary completely glove and gown and put on the protective clothing and go in and hold somebody's hand, because nobody should ever have to be alone. And it's things like that, and I assure you, nobody was ever alone. Nobody died alone, and nobody suffered alone. And what we learned is that there is a remarkable resiliency to the human spirit, and that no matter what the adversary, even though we can't ever explain the why, we know we can always honor the people, honor their memory, and continue to advance. And so this community that I live and work in, and the people that I work with at our hospitals and our other physicians and healthcare workers here are even more committed to our community, because what we found was this community is so resilient. They support each other, they love each other, they lift each other up at times when it seemed like there could only be dark. The light that we found was the light in this room. The support that we got from this community was incomprehensible. I really don't have the words to put forward. People will ask me all the time, Dr. Picone, why did you decide to come here? Why did you decide to work here? You're a cardiologist, you could have worked wherever you want. I choose to be here because of everybody in this room, because of the people that you all are, and to the community that we have. A lot of people will talk about the things we don't have, but what we do have is community. And we felt that every day in the healthcare arena. It didn't matter that there were sick people, and we knew more were going to come in, and that we didn't know how we were going to do our best. But what we knew is we were going to do our best. And we were going to look at our day, and we were going to get through that day, and then we were going to deal with tomorrow. And we learned a lot of good lessons about how to deliver health care, how to reach people in their homes, how dangerous it is not to have contact with each other. The importance of mental illness on our health. There's many, many lessons that we learned. But honestly, I feel now, as we look forward, what I learned from all of you, from your loved ones, is the power of the human spirit to overcome any adversity. That will be my forever inspiration. And so I want to let each and every one of you know that all of us in healthcare, all of the people that I represent, will always remember, and will always look forward, and will always treat each other just a little bit better, just a little bit nicer. We have such tremendous perspective, and I want to assure you that even when we don't know what to do, we always did our best, and that nobody here ever had to pass alone. So I want to thank all of you. I want you to know that, again, you continue to inspire us every day. We will always remember the people that we lost. We'll remember the fear, and we'll honor their memory by going forward, continuing to provide sustainable health care to our residents, and to always and never take for granted what we have every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Picone. That was very inspirational. From our healthcare perspective, I want to give you my perspective from the state government, from the legislative perspective. When we look back at history of what happened and how it happened, and I was the chairman of the House Veteran Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee. So our committee dealt with any issues dealing with emergency response. And I remember being in Montgomery County, and this is when the COVID first hit. And you started with one case, then two cases, and it just grew. And so they were bringing in the stuff that the sanitation stuff, and it's like, oh, you're bringing that in. Oh yeah, we're told from the healthcare professions we should be doing this. That was actually our last hearing we had before it actually became a full-blown crisis. We went to Pitt University, and it amazed me the research that was being done at Pitt. Pitt is an outstanding university, do great research there. And they were actually working on COVID, trying to understand it. And we actually felt good that the research they were doing, and that was early on. No one seen what was coming. And when it hit, I think most levels of government were shocked and surprised. They shut down our Capitol. They wanted to shut our offices down, and I would say this, my office never shut down. I refused to do that because I felt it was important. We had our doors locked and no one was permitted in, but my staff was there. And my chief executive director of my committee was in Harrisburg. Most were shut down. They talk about the legislature, and we were in session. You had a choice whether you went or you didn't go. I made a choice to go. I don't think legislature should be sitting at home when policemen, firemen, healthcare professionals, everyone else was out doing what they're supposed to do. Myself, Representative Longgetti, who was up in the Mercer County area, we didn't miss a day doing that. And I thought it was so important. There was probably about 30 plus members from throughout the state that actually went because we had to show a message that we want this thing to end and we're on top of it. We just didn't expect it to go on as it did. And you look back, and I looked at the book, and I see a lot of those names. I knew some who had passed from COVID. Others, I didn't realize that was their cause of death. They were young, they were old, all walks of life. I had a chance when I first got here to visit with some of the families. It's something that, who knows, as Dr. Picone said, 10 people were there, 8 survived, 2 didn't. And I look back and you say, we owe a lot of thanks. Healthcare professionals, I see my friend Dr. Melbar, all what they've done, the nurses, the support staff, the people that do the cooking and cleaning of those facilities. Never forget those people because they're so vital. You can't do your job unless you have your support staff. And you look at the social services of all that they've been through. And we get back to our police, our firemen, our EMS. And at the time, we were getting phone calls about safety equipment, the gloves, the masks, what masks are good, which masks aren't good. I never heard of N95. But then that all came down. And then there was a shortage of that. And we had an obligation, at least, from the legislative standpoint with our committee, how do we get these out there? And it was a very bipartisan effort from everybody. Myself, my colleague, Steve Barrar, we worked together on this stuff because it was so vitally important to try to get that out into our communities. So you look back and you say, who would have thought 2 years? And we still are feeling effects today. And when Dale had called me about this event, I said, it's so important. We need to bring closure to the families because I was talking to a few, they never got to say goodbye to their loved one. And what was even heartbreaking for us was we were getting phone calls at my office about they can't see mom or dad, they're in a nursing home. What do we do? And I understand why they were in that situation. And Dr. Picone, I'm sure you've seen it all at the hospital. I had a chance last year to visit a hospital in Philadelphia. And this is pretty much when COVID has pretty much subsided. But we talked to a few doctors and nurses that we met with, and they told us the effects of it. And I think people don't realize what our healthcare professionals go through. The doctor told us there that they were bringing in refrigerator vans because they had so many bodies that they lost in Montgomery County. The doctors lived this every day. The nurses lived it every day. The support staff saw it. It has a mental effect. And our social services are so critical to be able to help those. And this is going to go on for years, people, because the effects are still there to all those workers, a fireman, a policeman, the EMS person who responded. They have that effect. We're all human. Just to watch, to see that, and to see what's happened. So that's my perspective when I look at it from the legislative, what we had to deal with. And when you look back, you know, we did the best you could do under very difficult circumstances because no one knew how long it was going to last and what was going to happen. It was a week-by-week thing. You kept waiting. When's the call? Everything okay? No, it didn't work that way. And, you know, I look out there once again to our audience, the families. I hope this evening could be an uplifting effect for you. I know it's sad, but it's also positive because you know what? Your relatives deserve closure. You deserve closure as a family. To our heroes that we're honoring from all aspects of a community, our social service workers, and I just think of so many that we took for granted, whether it's a grocery store worker, the truck driver who got the products into that grocery store, the bank tellers that were always there without the money being able to, and to our ministers and our pastors, what they had to go through with the many church services they couldn't do in church, they did it outside, and they made the best of a very bad situation. And when you look how it all comes together as a community at all levels of government, you have to work together. Sometimes you experiment. Did it work this way? Did it not work that way? That's how we succeeded. We are a very positive community. I think we came together during that tragedy. And let's hope we never have to go through that again in our lifetime. And I just like to, you know, wish the families well and thank all those who were our heroes. It's in the book. And there's a lot of other heroes out there that aren't with us tonight because you know what? They did what had to be done to do the best that we could. So I thank you, Gail, for putting this together, Department of Health, and all those that are participating tonight because it's so important for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I have to say, Gail, thank you for accepting the invitation to the table because it was the easiest handoff that I ever made. Myra's laughing because she knows. Though, if you don't know me, I'm Loretta Spielvogel. I'm a current Lawrence County Commissioner. I am a member of the Lawrence County COVID-19 Advisory Group, and it is from the through the Health Initiative for Rural Pennsylvania. And it is so good to see Alicia and Tracy in person, instead of just those little squares on the screen for all of those months and others. We always had the opportunity to see each other, but it is so nice to be able to see you. At one of the first meetings that I was a part of, it was a Zoom meeting, there was talk of funding available to do some type of support effort for those members of the community that did not have that opportunity to acknowledge the loved ones that had passed. And I was asked in the meeting, just generally we were all asked if we knew of anybody or any agency that would be willing to take that on. And I immediately raised my hand and I said yes. And they said, oh, would you do that, Loretta? I said, no, I will gladly contact Gail Young from the United Way. And I know how well it will be done. So thank you, Gail. Don't thank me. Thank you for the great work that you never say no. You never say no. And there's not a cause that you don't embrace or take on, so thank you. But I first want to offer my sincere condolences to those of you that are here this evening at the loss of your loved one. Many of you did not have the opportunity to grieve properly or to feel the support of friends and family because of the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. We just hope that this recognition and remembrance dinner helps you in some small way through your grieving process. Before being elected in November of 2019, I attended many meetings in an effort to educate myself on all things Lawrence County. Commissioner meetings, planning meetings, zoning board hearings, assessment appeals hearings, township and borough meetings. I'm sure you get the drift. I learned a lot at those meetings, but nothing on how to survive a pandemic. Nothing. There were so many things I wanted to immerse myself in to benefit the residents of our county. Surviving a pandemic was not one of those things that I was looking forward to. I was sworn as Lawrence County Commissioner on January 6th of 2020. I was excited, enthusiastic, and ready to get to work. We knew about COVID and that we would have to deal with it, sort of like the flu, right? Never in my wildest imagination did I think that in less than 2 short months from being sworn in, I would be responsible for making the decisions that we as Lawrence County Commissioners were faced with doing. I would like to share parts of a timeline that details the county response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the non-emotional timeline, if you will. March 6th, 2020, the first 2 COVID-19 cases are reported in Pennsylvania. March 16th, 2020, the Board of Commissioners conducts a series of meetings with department heads, row officers, and court administration to determine how Lawrence County operations will be conducted in the event of a county-wide shutdown. Again, March 16th, the President Judge of Lawrence County Court of Common Pleas issues 2 court orders regulating court operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. March 17th, the Board of Commissioners declares a preemptive disaster emergency for Lawrence County, allowing for greater access to state emergency funding and enhancing the ability of county government to respond to the COVID-19 health crisis. March 18th, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania issues an emergency order requiring the Pennsylvania court system to scale back operations to essential functions only. March 19th, the governor orders all non-life-sustaining businesses to close their physical locations. March 20th, the Lawrence County Government Center and all county-operated facilities are closed to the general public. Non-essential Lawrence County employees are laid off. I'm here to tell you that they were all called back, and during the time that they were laid off, we continued their health care and continued to pay for their insurances. March 24th, 2020, the Lawrence County Board of Commissioners extends the deadline for property owners to pay their property taxes at the face value rate from July 7th, 2020 to August 10th, 2020. March 25th, the first COVID-19 case is reported in Lawrence County. March 28th, the first COVID-19 death is reported in Lawrence County. March 31st, the governor places Lawrence County under a stay-at-home order. April 28th, the Lawrence County Board of Commissioners further extends the deadline for property owners to pay their property taxes at the face value rate from August 10th to September 14th. April 29th, the Lawrence County Board of Commissioners recommends to the governor that Lawrence County move into the yellow phase of the governor's COVID-19 plan for Pennsylvania. Do we remember the COVID colors? We never thought those colors would be that important, right? Right. May 5th, Lawrence County Board of Commissioners appropriates $40,000 in COVID-19 community development block grant funding to prevent food insecurity through the ACTS team program. Because we remember everything was shut down, but we had to get those meals to those seniors and to those families. May 20th, Lawrence County moves into the yellow phase of the governor's COVID-19 plan. May 29th, Lawrence County moves into the green phase of the governor's COVID-19 plan. June 1st, all Lawrence County employees return to work. June 2nd, the 2020 presidential primary election is held without incident. June 4th, the Lawrence County Government Center and most other county-operated facilities reopen to the general public. June 17th, Lawrence County receives its first COVID-19 mass testing site in Union Township from the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Walmart. July 9th, Lawrence County Community Action Partnership begins accepting applications for Lawrence County's rent relief program. July 9th also, Lawrence County receives its full CARES Act allocation of $7.7 million from the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. July 10th, Lawrence County awards CARES Act funding to all 27 municipalities in Lawrence County based on population. July 30th, Lawrence County opens its PPE reimbursement grant protection window. That's the masks, the gloves, the gowns. August 4th, Lawrence County Board of Commissioners approves business and nonprofit interruption grants for entities impacted by COVID-19. Over $3 million, that's almost half of our entire allocation of CARES Act funding, went to businesses and nonprofits to assist 171 different businesses, small business in Lawrence County, for up to $25,000 in grants, not loans, grants, to assist them through their shutdowns. October 20th, Lawrence County Board of Commissioners approved $250,000 in emergency grant funding to volunteer fire departments because they couldn't have their fish fries. They couldn't have their bingos. November 3rd, the 2020 presidential general election is held without incident. November 10th, business and nonprofits are awarded PPE reimbursement grants. 62 small businesses and nonprofit organizations were awarded over $93,000 at that time. November 30th, all Lawrence County department heads are instructed to implement work-from-home protocols and staggered scheduling, as well as limit public-facing operations to appointment only, because we had done some backsliding then. We realized that it wasn't going away that quickly. December 7th, the Lawrence County Government Center and all other county-owned facilities were again closed to the public. December 10th, the governor orders restaurants, bars, and other businesses to close through the new year. December 10th, the Lawrence County Board of Commissioners allocates up to $360,000 in grant assistance to businesses and nonprofits impacted by the governor's, it was a 2-week closure, but that was the impact through those business closures. We were able to assist 84 businesses and nonprofits for that $360,000. December 14th, Lawrence County is awarded $143,000 for food assistance through the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's Emergency Food Assistance Program. December 15th, Lawrence County Board of Commissioners announces up to $100,000 in funding for rental assistance for at-risk residents. February 6th, Lawrence County is awarded close to $1 million for grant funding for businesses in the hospitality industry. February 9th, Lawrence County is awarded $5,620,000 for rental and utility assistance for its citizens. February 23rd, Lawrence County joined 6 other counties in southwest Pennsylvania to discuss the formation of a regional health department. March 8th, 2021, Lawrence County launches its application portal for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program administered through LCAP. March 15th, the Lawrence County Economic Development Corporation releases the COVID-19 Hospitality Industry Recovery Program application, with $968,000 available for qualifying businesses in the accommodation and/or food service industries. That was the span of 1 year, just in case anybody didn't keep track. It was from March to March. I want to acknowledge our former County Commissioner Morgan Boyd for compiling that timeline, as well as the entire Lawrence County response to COVID-19 document that includes our actions in more detail. And I would gladly make that available to anyone if you would be interested in that, because the work that was done was phenomenal, not just by us, but by our employees and our staff, and as Chris said, and as Dr. Picone said, by everybody in our community. And that's the conclusion to what I previously said was the non-emotional recollection and timeline. I still continue to process the emotional toll that this has taken not only on me personally, but on us as a community. I was on automatic pilot for most of 2020 and into 2021. I had to shut down my emotions. Others were looking at me for answers that I did not have. I think it was self-preservation. And I think looking around this room, I think a lot of us were in self-preservation mode. We had to be. We had to be, because we were looked on as the people that would have the answers. We were supposed to have those answers. We had no playbook or manual that we used to navigate this pandemic. We didn't even have a county health department office here in Lawrence County. I remember looking out my office window that faces East Washington Street and not seeing a single vehicle go by day after day after day. But throughout all of this, we persevered. COVID-19 brought out the worst and the best of us as human beings. I choose to focus on the best of us, from our first responders, police and fire departments, doctors and nurses, the nurses' aides, the janitors, the custodians, the road workers, everyday ordinary people. Lawrence County rose to answer the call. Whether it was getting masks and gloves to nursing homes, food distributions, delivering meals to senior citizens, patronizing local businesses, buying those gift cards from those businesses, I've heard from so many say that that sustained them. So taking that time, even if you bought one $25 gift card, it helped that business run. Conducting vaccination clinics, or simply checking in on our neighbors. The best of Lawrence County shine bright with kindness and support through the darkest of days. And tonight we come full circle to remember those that did not recover from the virus. Tonight we come full circle to pay our respects to those who no longer have a loved one at the table. We just hope that in some small way, we are able to lessen your grief. Thank you. Of course, I don't have a handoff either.
Thank you, Loretta, for those heartfelt words. I think we all feel the same way. But I'd just like to introduce the video. This is a former school superintendent, Debbie DeBlasio. She couldn't be with us this evening, but we were able to capture her thoughts on video.
Good evening. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Debbie DeBlasio. I'm the former superintendent of Newcastle Area School District. I retired after 42 years in the district in June of 2022. I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you tonight due to a prior obligation, but I cannot let this night go without talking to you a little bit about what happened to us on March 13th, 2022. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in my office. I get a phone call from the Department of Ed that they will be holding a Zoom meeting within 15 minutes. Little did I know the meeting would change our lives forever. They stated on the Zoom meet that all Pennsylvania schools would be closed for 2 weeks due to a virus called COVID. The 2 weeks turned into the rest of the 2020 school year and the 21-22 school year. The students, the staff, the parents, the community, and the whole world was turned upside down now. My main concern prior to COVID was education of our students. After COVID, my priorities changed. Although education continued to be important, there were many more concerns to address. The students either had no idea what was going on to deal with or to how to deal with COVID. That weekend was St. Patrick's Day weekend. We were going out to celebrate. Well, instead of that, we were in the office Saturday and Sunday night, day and night. Monday, day and night, and on and on and on. We were not properly prepared for the magnitude of this pandemic. Our main focus in the school district turned mainly to health, safety, and nutrition for our students and their families. The manner that we delivered instruction and communication changed dramatically. It was delivered solely on technology. The health and safety, we posted letters daily. We posted letters daily on the Newcastle Area School District webpage. We encouraged masking and assisted anyone who needed a mask. We educated about social distancing, continued reminders about hygiene, washing hands over and over again, Administrators, teachers, nurses, guidance counselors were constant communication with our students and their families. The purpose of the calls were to assist them in needs associated with COVID and all the problems arising from it. Quarantine lengths to minimize the effects of COVID or to spread to other members of the family. The agencies available for assistance for the mental health and the social emotional needs of our students and their families. As the CDC guidelines came out, we met with recommendations. We posted the recommendations daily, sometimes hourly. It was really a frightening time for everyone. Nutrition. First thing we did was put a plan in place for buses to take breakfast and lunch for 7 days for every child in the household. We took the food to their bus stops to help alleviate transportation problems. We also had a major concern for our students and their families in the Newcastle Area School District to be fed properly and nourished during this time. We sat down with a group of administrators, our food service director, our business manager. From there, we started to plan together. Then came the community members, the church clubs, the local restaurants, previous graduating classes started donating money for us to provide drive-by dinners for families along with the district. Every evening from 4 to 6, we were at the Newcastle High School giving drive-by food for our families up to 6. I always knew what a special community Newcastle was, but I realized the people here are caring, loving, and really around their community in a time of crisis. And we were definitely in a crisis. The education came. Technology had to be purchased to be able to start educating our students during Google Meets and Google Classrooms. The district purchased Chromebooks for students and for teachers. The students were learning a brand new way, and teachers were teaching differently than they have ever taught before. Obviously, the teachers lacked contact with their students, and with that, they lost personal contact. Students became faces on a computer. Anyone that knows a 5-year-old or a 9-year-old knows it's very difficult to hold their attention even 20 minutes in person, let alone on a computer. Students were able to see their peers, but could not communicate with them. Teachers were adding work to Google Classroom daily, trying to get most out of the students. While teachers were working diligently, everyone was starting to see the COVID numbers increase. We were required by the state to write a health and safety plan and an education plan. It was challenging, putting plans down when they would change daily, sometimes hourly. We provided the social, emotional learning to students through Google Classrooms, along with our wonderful partnerships with our community agency. Social and emotional learning at this point was so very important. As we were preparing, we had little knowledge of the effect it would have on our students at home. Some of them were sick with COVID, some of their loved ones were very ill, and some lost a loved one from this terrible virus. Students were losing their everyday socialization with their friends, their teachers, their neighbors, with the entire community. There was no contact sports, nowhere for children to go outdoors and to socialize with one another. Then, after all this and putting everything together, we needed to start a return to school plan. We had to redesign classrooms for social distancing in classrooms, as well as hallways, cafeteria. Children love to talk in the cafeteria with each other and socialize. They had to shout across tables. It just was not conducive to learning. If students came down with COVID, parents in their classroom had to be notified, the entire classroom. Those sitting close to them had to be quarantined for 10 days, and then it went down to 5 days. There were even times that a whole class had to be quarantined. The rule of thumb was that if 4 children in that class came down with COVID, the entire class had to return to Google Classroom. COVID was a logistical nightmare. No traditional physical education classes. The students were not allowed to be in physical contact. So there was no way to really relieve the stress at school that we could offer other than working with social, emotional, and any mental health issues that came up and continue to support the children the best that we knew how. The effects of COVID. Attendance was poor. Parents still were not comfortable sending their students back to school. Their students' social emotional showed a deficit in their actions. We had hardships during this time. The students, the staff, and myself had a hardship with illness and death. Needless to say, this was the hardest year and a half of my career. However, we survived. But as they say, a diamond earns its sparkle from the pressure it endured. The Newcastle Area School District, its staff, its community, and most importantly, our students certainly sparked under immense pressure. And for that, I am forever thankful and encouraged. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you, and it was a pleasure serving on this committee.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Kelly Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of Human Services Center here in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. I've had the privilege of being with Human Services Center for 36 years. So many of the programs and services and staff that I have worked with these many years are very much part of what I call my HSC family. In thinking about talking about the effect of COVID on behavioral health, I had to kind of go back, as some of the other speakers did, and think about how this all came to be, because I think that the early days of COVID, because we've moved past, is hard to actually think about so directly. So what I went back to in thinking about tonight, I went back to December of 2019, which seems like a long time ago. But I remember watching the news reports about COVID-19 outbreaks around the world and thinking, it won't be long before it gets to the United States. As the new year, 2020, began, I recall that our administrative discussions at work became more focused on when it hits our region, our area, our community, what are we gonna do? All too soon, the constant search for guidelines and answers from the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, and the PA Department of Health became part of our life, to the point where constantly looking for updated information became a #1 activity, because we had to make decisions on how we could serve people safely. On March 15th, we received a Department of Human Services Human Services Bulletin, which is a new regulation that suspended many of the in-person service delivery requirements that we had to abide by. And so it offered the opportunity for many of our services to utilize telehealth and even audio services. I never really believed that this was going to become such a in-your-face kind of thing, but we realized that within a very short period of time, things were going to start shutting down, and we had to have a way to stay connected, to offer services to people. So the other thing that kind of happened along with that is we started to hear the term essential workers. And we were part of that as behavioral health professionals, which was a little different picture, because I would say that prior to that, even though I would tell you that I think mental health is very important, and I've spent my career involved in it, and I'm very proud to be a part of it, that most often It was not something that people were willing to talk about and not willing to realize that it's part of everyone's picture. So, as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as well as many other parts of the country, and federal government ordered non-essential businesses to close and people to shelter home, we were faced with the dilemma of how to safely provide services. Schools were closing. Many members of our workforce, which were doctors, nurses, therapists, case managers, our residential program workers, we were trying to give them guidance on how we were going to be able to continue to deliver those services because we were essential workers. Many members of our workforce were now working from home using telehealth while supervising their children's education. Every aspect of life, as we all knew, was different. And we had no definitive information as to how to deal with all these changes. I've heard each speaker very eloquently talk about the fact that we had to be very adaptive, and we had to learn how to reach out to each other, communicate, and do our best, even though we didn't necessarily know exactly what we were going to have to do because nobody had written this playbook for us. As a behavioral health provider of treatment services, case management services, and residential services, those we served were anxious and fearful how they were going to survive. In our residential homes, we had to limit them from going out to try to keep them safe and not allow them to have visitors. And we had to be concerned about our staff being well enough to be able to go into the workforce. We tried to ensure compliance with all the safety protocols and feared what would happen if one of our residents or staff tested positive for COVID. Many of our services were no longer able to happen in person, and so we had to keep in touch via phone calls. Many folks didn't have unlimited minutes, so there were times when we couldn't reach the folks that we had worked with for so many years. Our behavioral health staff were dealing with their own anxieties about the pandemic and trying to manage their own children's education, loved ones' health and wellness, and the harsh realities of COVID. Families and friends could no longer gather together during festive occasions, and conversely, they were unable to be with their loved ones who were hospitalized, thus leaving many no option to be with them as they died. The months turned into a year and then another year. Everyone faced uncertainty, isolation, and no end in sight. The expansion of telehealth proved to be a saving grace for many people who needed access to health care, including behavioral health. We saw increased numbers of people seeking services, especially our psychiatric and therapy services that could be done over the phone or via the telehealth platform. We had less and less canceled or no-showed appointments as people were sheltering at home because they were eager for the support. As our clerical staff would call to remind people of their appointments, those calls took anywhere between 15 minutes to a half hour for each person because many of them just wanted that reassurance that we were thinking about them and that they were going to get to see their therapist or their doctor or their case manager. So it really became a great way to continue to support people and offer hope. The impact of the pandemic was in the forefront of every news broadcast. Discussions began to highlight the impact of the pandemic on our mental health and wellness. As we shared the pandemic across the world, we began to share the effects. Every one of us at some point or another experienced anxiety, fear, loneliness, depression, uncertainty, grief, and those all became part of our discussions. The shared experience also opened the door to recognizing that our mental health is important and that treatment can be very effective. Many brave individuals shared their stories, which helped to reduce the stigma of mental health. As we moved forward with a return to the workplaces and schools, many people experienced difficult transitions as the post-pandemic still involved COVID-19 infections, vaccines, protocols. We had to reevaluate our needs and priorities and the impact that COVID had on everyone's mental health and wellness. Many people needed additional supports as they moved forward with their return to work, to community activities, and children back to school. A report from the World Health Organization indicated that the pandemic has had severe and far-reaching repercussions to health systems, economies, and societies. Countless people have died and lost their livelihoods. Families and communities have been strained and separated. Children and young people have missed out on learning and socializing. Businesses have gone bankrupt. Millions of people have fallen below the poverty line. As people grapple with these health and social and economic impacts, mental health has been widely affected. Plenty of us became anxious. But for some, COVID-19 has sparked or amplified much more serious mental health problems. A greater number of people have reported psychological distress and symptoms of anxiety and depression. And there has been worrying signs of a more widespread suicidal thoughts and behaviors, including among healthcare workers. Some groups of people have been affected more than others. Young people have been left vulnerable to social isolation and disconnectedness, which can fuel feelings of anxiety, uncertainty, and loneliness. For some children and adolescents, being made to stay home may have increased the risk of family stress or abuse, which are risk factors for mental health problems. Women similarly faced greater stress in the home. While mental health needs have risen, mental health services have been severely disrupted. I'd like to emphasize that there are many available resources for mental health and wellness, and that, as we've talked about tonight, in this community, there was a lot of effort on not only Human Services Center's part, but many other social services to stay connected, to reach out, and to be a part of what was going on in the community so that we could help support outreach. It's extremely important that we encourage each other to seek help if experiencing problems. Mental health is an important part of your overall wellness, just as important to seek treatment and just as it's important to seek treatment and support for physical health care difficulties. It's okay to seek help when you're feeling sad, anxious, or not yourself. It's important to prioritize your mental health to be your best. The other thing that I would mention, which is very much at the heart of tonight, is that we all have done through losses but there are disruptions to when people get the opportunity to grieve. And sometimes people think that, well, we weren't able to honor our loved one in the moment, and that we can't continue to do that, or I shouldn't have any ongoing grief. And what I want to tell you is that grief is part of a journey, and it happens at different times and different ways. And I encourage everyone to not rush through that process, but allow yourself to have that moment, because you matter, your loved one's life mattered, and this community really does want to be part of an overall healing process for all of you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask all of you to stand. I think we've probably grown fatigued sitting there. So I just want to begin my words. And I don't know, Gail, I really appreciate this wonderful event tonight and all the planning that went into it, and the committee members and all that they've done, and the speakers thus far. It's been very enjoyable, insightful, and so I really appreciate that. I guess as I do begin to share with you all from a pastor's perspective, minister's perspective, I serve as a chaplain for Allegheny and their hospice division. I also pastor a church and Elwood Christian Assembly, and also work as a marketplace chaplain and volunteer as a police chaplain. So I have a hand in a lot of different areas, if you will. And I want to first and foremost let those here know that have lost. And a part of the theme tonight is to help those that have lost dearly, your loved ones, to find the reality of your healing. And for some of you, I trust that tonight it can be a beginning because of what we've been through, a lot of the circumstances. You've been involved in complicated grief. It's not a normal grief in what we've been through, and those that have lost. And I want to make sure every one of you know that we as the committee and the Greater Lawrence County, we see you. We see your hurt, and we see your pain, we feel it. And I want you to know that in reality of that, I want you to begin with me here tonight. You know, Angela Mayo, she is a famed author and poet, and she said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you make them feel. And I just want to take a moment, and I want you all to find a place of thankfulness tonight. We're going to close our eyes in just a moment, and I want you to think of that loved one, the people that you've lost, some of you multiple losses in your family. And I want you to concentrate upon the way they made you feel. I want you to feel that love tonight, because it's a part of your healing. It's to remember, as know though they are gone, you may never be the same without them, but you're never the same because of them. And the heart of that is what grieving is all about. It's about remembering life is a precious gift. And COVID really exacerbated the illusion of control that we live with in our culture. We really have no control over anything. And when we lose people suddenly and we have no control over a situation, it leads us into a fight or flight. And some of us are still fighting. Some of us have escaped and haven't quite come out to begin to deal with some deeper issues. But tonight's a great start. I'm so glad that all of you are here and receiving the support you're receiving, and I would encourage you to continue to reach out. But I want you to take a moment with me and just close your eyes and feel with your heart that love, that memory of your loved one. You may be seated. You can't help but be grateful when you begin to absorb the reality of what can never die out of this world, which is the love of people that have made such an impact in our lives. I know in my life as COVID-19 began, I found myself on the phone with my mom on a St. Patrick's Day of 2020. And as I talked to her about my dad who was battling cancer, I I didn't give you my name, and I know it was announced. My name is Matthew Bupp, Reverend Matthew Bupp. My dad was Dennis Bupp, and he was a pastor, chaplain up at the hospital for 26 years. And he was battling, he was in the throes of a decline, and talking with my mom on that St. Patrick's Day, and to get a phone call about an hour later that she had taken a heart attack. And the next day I found myself through all these protocols, and I was so grateful that they allowed me to go into the hospital with my dad that night, and he got admitted because he needed to go. He was resisting it, but regardless, once we got to my mom's room, within 20 minutes, she let go with him holding his hand. And I spent the next 3 days under these new COVID protocols, sleeping in a chair next to my dad as he began to walk down the road of his passing, not from COVID, but underneath the weight, because I could remember having only 15 members at my mom's funeral. The difficulty that comprised. We tried to do it by video and all, but it wasn't the same. I thought of all the people that could have been there. And we did try to do something later on after my dad had passed 4 months later. And later on that summer, we did something together in a church, and a few people showed up, not quite as many as I would have liked to have seen, and found that counsel and encouragement. So I feel the pain that a lot of you went through, not being able to have the service you would have liked to have had. Because there's something that really completes and helps us in the process of grief when we celebrate. And that's why I wanted to begin with that reality of the way your loved one made you feel. Don't ever forget that. And if you're struggling, I want you to rest. You see, life has a way of taking. Why does life take? Life takes because ultimately there's nothing guaranteed. Absolutely nothing in your life is guaranteed. There's only one thing that can be guaranteed. Now, I, as a minister, would call that peace. And Christ said it was a peace that the world doesn't give. The world doesn't know it. You can't get peace by everything being okay. You get peace, and you find a place of being okay when everything's not okay. It's an assurance. It's knowing that you're going to be okay. Scripture says that weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And by the way, Gail, I don't know what kind of wisdom it was to put a preacher as the last speaker. Now, I say that in jest to get you guys laughing, that I'm not going to continue and go on, but I really want my heart for all of you, from my perspective, is for you to find a level of healing, at least a process, to something to remember to take with you tonight. And the first thing I would encourage you to mark down, if you take mental notes, is to remember, be thankful for that loved one. Be thankful. You can't be mad in life if you're thankful. You know, it's like oil and water. It just doesn't go together. It doesn't work. Being thankful helps the process of grief. And I want to encourage you to do that. There were so many other areas that alluded to the reality of the illusion of control that we live with in our culture, and COVID tested that control. That's the way people were feeling. They were out of control. What do we do? What are we going to... How are we going to do this? And ultimately, it was like flying by the seat of your pants sometimes, even in healthcare and some things were coming down the pike. What do? You have to do this and that. And you just sat back, and all you could do is let go, because if you tried to hold on, like literally you would ruin yourself. You had to literally every day find a place of serenity in the reality of, I am completely out of control. I don't know what to do, but I know we can do it together. And that's what got us through. I remember with a parishioner, the heartache of having to say goodbye to his sister, who was dying, not from COVID in the hospital, because of the protocol, was not able to see. She went into the hospital, COVID hit, stayed there for months, came down with sepsis, and never saw her again. The pain, that sorrow, and that difficulty. I had another friend that, in a place, in a home, assisted living, an employee there, and his mom and dad used to attend a church. He was a young man in his 40s, passed away. And I remember doing the funeral for him. And it was such a heartbreak because his wife was told, because of COVID and a positive test, that she couldn't attend his funeral. And so it was, you saw this all the way around. There was so much of this feeling of, it was like another shoe dropped. Something else would happen and go. And it kept pulling at you, and it kept vying for your emotional and mental well-being. And but you know what? As time went on, as a pastor, it also gave me an opportunity to really begin to teach the realities of what it means not to be conformed to the pattern of the world. What is the pattern of the world? You know, COVID, the way it acted even in our bodies, it was like an antigen that created an immune response in many respects. And it caused problems in that reality. And fear is kind of an antigen for us spiritually and mentally. When we get hit with it, why do we fear? We're fear because we're not in control. But when we try to respond to that fear with control and make it better, how many know that many times we make it what? We make it worse. The antigen of fear is something not to fight against. It's something to ultimately listen to. If you look within the word fear, what do you have? There's another word hiding. It's in plain sight, ear. You've got to give ear to your fear. You've got to listen to what your fears are telling you. And you've got to let it go. You got to surrender. You got to deal with that. And as you yield to the thing that's going on, as much as you don't like it, what you can ultimately find is a place of healing, a place to begin to process. You know, there's a thing called long COVID, and it's real. But I believe there's a spiritual, mental long COVID that a lot of people are in. And its root, its antigen is fear, and it's driving people to control. When you lose control in one area, you overcompensate in other areas. And we become, in many respects, miserable people. But ultimately, I'm referring to the things, the struggles that we have. As a community, we've come together, and we're learning to process and move forward. But I saw within the hearts of people a deep and a difficult process unfolding. And I want to encourage you all to not just be thankful, but I want you to live, I want to give you 3 thoughts here as we bring tonight to a conclusion, at least as far as my words are concerned. The second thing I want to encourage you as we remember and we're thankful for those loved ones and the way they made us feel and the influence, the change that they created in our life, and we celebrate them, is to remember to live life. Life is too short. Live life, knowing it has no guarantees, letting go of control. Don't try to overcome your fears, but listen to them, deal with them. Whatever you're afraid of, address. Talk about it. Talk about your fears and do something, not avoiding, but begin to process through those things and live with your heart wide open. Learn to let bygones be bygones. You know, one of the things that I remember and ultimately watching people go through as a minister is that COVID made you realize the time that you wasted. What did I do? I should have said this. I should have done this. Why didn't I move? And again, it creates another layer of our grief process. But I want to encourage you, second of all, learn to live with your heart wide open. That means admit, process what's gone wrong. There's nothing you can do about it. Let go of control. Don't fear it, and let it go. Forgive. Forgive yourself. Some of you have to forgive yourself tonight. It's not your fault. You understand your loved ones are free. And I think they would want you to be free. They want you to walk in a place, remembering them, celebrating them. Some of you need to remember the things that they enjoyed and put it to practice. You know, some of those little things that made them quirky, who they were. Listen, life's too short to worry about. You know, there's like a song by Martina McBride, I want you to dance. I want you to do the things. And if your loved ones could say that, they would want you to do the things that maybe are a little risky there. Listen, life's too short. Live with your heart wide open. And with those thoughts and minds, in mind, continue to pursue your life as a pastor, as a chaplain. Ultimately, my life in ministry, it revolves around grief. It revolves around the reality of what it means to let go and not be conformed. There's a scripture I want to share with you. It says, "Don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And what I'm teaching you, is a renewal process. It's healing. Remember, Live with your heart wide open. Don't be afraid, but square off against those fears and understand that there is absolutely nothing in your life that you can't overcome if you live with the purpose of dealing with these things appropriately in our lives. And the last thing I want to encourage you to do is give. Give. I don't know whether it's volunteering, but and in the midst of, and don't avoid the difficulties in life, you know, the things that make us suffer, even the things that we've been through. I'm thinking about the people in Maui right now, people that are suffering, just the heartache and all that they're going through. Shoulder those burdens in your heart. Continue to pray. Give of yourself. Give of your time and your energy. A lot of times we can tend to, when we live with that long spiritual COVID of fear in our life, and we tend to seclude ourselves, and we become closed off and guarded. And I want you to live, because when you live with your heart wide open, you begin to give, and you give liberally and generously and without reservation. And watch how this begins to free you and helps you find a renewal. That's what grief is all about. It's about renewing your mind in the process and not being stuck in this cage, in this prison, self-induced prison that we often find ourselves in because we've given in to our fears and we've let them dictate to us what life is all about. Life is far too short to live in that self-induced prison. And I want to encourage all of you to press in. And I know some of the words that I've shared with you tonight, I trust that I appreciate your willingness to indulge me in doing that, even as a minister, but my experiences and the things that we went through. I can remember being in the hospital, being called in and praying like last prayers with a gentleman over the phone as I'm seeing him. I wanted so bad just to be with him, just to make that contact, but knowing that there was a nurse there making that contact. As Dr. Pacome reflected, they weren't dying alone. They were dying with ministers like me praying in their ear and ministering to their spiritual needs. And most importantly, I believe that God is near to the brokenhearted, the scriptures reflect. He's near to those who are crushed in spirit. And I believe this definitely crushed us. But you know what? When life is at its worst, God is at its best. He is at his best. When everything's going well, I feel the furthest from God. But when my life is challenged, that's when I get the closest to him. And I believe he was with all of our loved ones. Just as close as a breath is, he was there. And so I just pray God's richest blessings of his peace be with all of you. And know that each of you are being thought of. And we're praying not only just for all of you, but so many others that couldn't make it here tonight, that I know that couldn't maybe emotionally make that appearance yet. Pray for them. Look for opportunities, like I shared, to give. And so I appreciate you, Gail, and appreciate everybody here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Buck. Let's give all of our speakers a round of applause. I can also say within the last 18 months, I think I've lost about 7 family members. So once again, we're all feeling this, but I really enjoyed hearing from the various speakers and their perspective. And to sum it up, it's all about love and community. And I'm so glad you all are here tonight, that we can kind of embrace you and let you know, as a community, we're here for you. And also to let you know, the number 211, you can call that direct if you have any health and human service questions, or 988 for any mental health issues you may have. So those numbers are readily available. I'm going to ask, we have a little bit more of our program to go through. Through the support of the Pennsylvania Rural Communities, we were able to secure a grant. And through that grant, we were able to have keepsakes that we're presenting tonight for each family. But I thought it was important to call all the family names. There's something about putting those names in the atmosphere that helps with healing. So at this time, I'm going to call our one of our board members and committee members, Colleen Chamberlain from CareerLink, along with Alicia Friedel and Tracy Schleep, along with Lori. She's going to help pass out the flowers.
Thank you, Gail. We appreciate that. As we recognize each of our loved ones, we do ask that one member of the family, when we call the name, please come to the front to receive their keepsake ornament, a gift card, and one of these beautiful centerpieces that you see on the tables as their gifts. Would a member from the family of Ernestine Akins? Charles Anderson. Helen Anderson. Larry Avery Sr. Anthony Barletto. Joseph Benegas. Pamela Jo Phillips Brown. Joseph and Nancy Caravella. James E. Cardella. Maxine Carlson. Jerry Clark. Joseph Randall Clavelli. Daniel DeClaudio. Robert Del Signor. Stephen Jean Duda. Beatrice Edgerton. Philip Feld. William Fuller. Richard J. Glidden. Richard Graham. Christola Hall and Billy Lafayette Malone. Nicole Halstead. Ted Haslick. Sandy Kenst. Frank Lambiase. Elizabeth and Rodolfo McAlintal. Narina Owens. Wayne Ramsey. Suzanne Stock. Ronald Strobel. And Daniel Troxel. May the Lord keep and bless you all.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Just know that you all are loved. You are loved, and we're always here for you. We do have a solo that's coming up before our benediction, and the solo is coming from Janice Gunn Scott. I thought a song that would be appropriate for us to leave to knowing that we love you and we're praying for you. We're praying for all of our families. And then we'll have the benediction by Reverend John E. Young III from Bible Way Church of God in Christ. So they will come in that order: Janice Gunn Scott, and then Pastor John Young for the benediction.
When I was asked to sing, I felt honored to do that. And as I began to pray about it, this is what I could hear my master, the Lord Jesus, saying to me: it's not about your voice. I want them to hear my heart. So I want you to know tonight that God's heart is what you will take away tonight, that you will know that he loves you, that he has not forsaken you or forgotten you, that you are loved. And this song, I Need You to Survive, is what we're going to try and get out to you tonight, okay? All right. I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is his will that all our needs be supplied. We are important to him. He needs us to survive. Yes, you are important to me. I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth, 'cause I love you, I need you to survive. It is his will that every need supply. You are important to him. He needs you to survive. We are important to him. He needs us to survive. You are important to one another. You are important to each other. Take out the time to love each other. We need us to survive. Don't forget he needs you. Don't forget we need you to survive.
Thank you, Janice. That was beautiful. And we'll have our benediction by Pastor John Young.
Thank you. What a wonderful evening tonight. Just so many words that have been spoken tonight have really touched our hearts in so many ways. Loretta, everyone, thank you for your words of encouragement and just endurance. Thank you, Reverend. But to everyone, I shouldn't start naming people because I'm going to forget somebody. But I thank you, Gail. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, United Way, for putting this program on. Come on, let's clap our hands one more time for them. They didn't have to, but they did it. Sister Myra, we thank you. A lot of you all don't know that Gail is a missionary. She is a licensed missionary in the church, and we're certainly thankful for her gift and callings, not only to the community, but to the body of Christ. And it is such a fitting time like this that we have these kind of programs that we're able to encourage one another. And when you look around this room, you kind of realize we're not that different, huh? Yeah, all of us have sustained some kind of loss, some kind of grief, some kind of tragedy, and it is by the grace of God that we're able to wake up in the morning and get ourselves together. As she just sang, Sister Gunn, we're needed of each other to survive. So we're going to pray, we're going to go home, and we love you all with the love of the Lord. Let us bow our heads. Father, we thank you for this time that you have allowed us to come to this place for this occasion. God, we thank you for the United Way. We thank you for all of those who have participated on tonight's service. God, we thank you for the thoughtfulness of heart, Lord, the generosity of the United Way to reach out into the community and just to show our love and support, not only to those who have lost loved ones, God, but even those who were the heroes for the days, for the times. God, you equipped us for this pandemic season, God, not knowing in our hearts and our minds that you have given us supernatural strength to each and every one of us to be able to do what we thought not possible. Then we learned to realize and depend that it was not us, but it was you working through us. God, we thank you. We praise you for the days that come ahead, not knowing what tomorrow may hold, but we know who holds tomorrow. God, we thank you that we're walking in your hand, we're walking in your wisdom, we're walking in your ways, and you said that you would lead us into a brighter day. Now, Lord, we ask you to bless us as we depart from this place, but never from your presence, that we may meet again at another date and another time on a joyous occasion. In Jesus' name we pray, and we all said amen.
Amen.
Amen. God bless you. Have a safe evening.
Before we leave, I did want to mention that COVID is still alive and well, and we do have COVID test kits on the table out the door. Take as many as you like. As you know now, they come with a price. So they're free. So take as many as you like. And thank you all. I love you all. And thank you all for coming. God bless you.
Don't stop believing. Hold on to your loved one's memory. People, your loved ones are with you. Don't stop believing.